More protests are expected this week from Extinction Rebellion, the group campaigning for an end to climate change. Let's show you the scenes in London yesterday. The climate campaign group vowing to stage protests for the next 2 weeks, similar to those demonstrations it carried out in 2019. They say that the government needs to stop new investment in fossil fuels.
Well, a protester who arrived in London yesterday has said she's looking forward to disrupting the city in general. What do you think of that? Here's the clip.
General vibe is that everyone is carrying chairs and tired from that, and everyone's really excited for the next 2 weeks. It's going to be awesome, and we're looking forward to disrupting London in general. And yeah, would you like a sticker?
Would you?
No, I think I know where I'd put it. Let's talk to Donnachadh McCarthy, who's the climate columnist for The Independent. Donnachadh, the problem here, and we just saw it, they know what they're against and how they want to protest, but no real answers being offered here. And let's face it, we seem to be looking at a particular type of middle-class, white protester that perhaps doesn't capture the imagination as other protests would.
Well, I mean, both of you are middle class and white, and we're listening to you, so I don't see why that's a valid criticism. However, you say that they're not proposing any solutions. The main demand of the protests this week is very clear. It's calling on the government to make a halt all new investments in fossil fuels, both by Shell, BP, Barclays and HSBC. United Kingdom is one of the world's largest centres of investments in new fossil fuels, which we cannot afford with the planet ablaze. If any of you were watching the news last night, the horrific scenes in Turkey, Greece, Athens, Algeria, Canada, Siberia, why should we not wake up to what they are calling for, which it seems very reasonable? We have loads of fossil fuels already. Why are we investing $5 trillion in new fossil fuels to destroy ourselves?
Good morning to you, Donnachadh. I mean, not taking away from what the protesters are doing, and quite rightly, in many ways, I mean, this is of huge concern, and we'll talk more about the climate crisis. But at a time where there is also an ongoing crisis in Afghanistan, the G7 taking place later on today, will their voices be heard? I mean, will Boris Johnson, will the government take this seriously enough?
That's a very good question. I mean, the question I think people like myself and people on the streets are asking, we've been shouting the alarm for 30 years, and still we have a government that's investing in new oil fields, new coal fields, new gas fields, expanding our airports, expanding our road network. So the question is, in a democracy, what can we do to ensure that our banks, that HSBC and Barclays, stop investing in new fossil fuels? I confess, despair. What's happening across the world with these huge increases in temperature and fires and droughts and floods? People like us thought this would be happening in 2050. It's happening now. And I confess to personal despair. We really need action from our government and our banks and our oil companies.
No, the government couldn't possibly say they're not aware of the issues here. I know that we're talking about this now because of the Extinction Rebellion action, and that may be justification enough in its own right, but bringing a city to a standstill, is that the way to get this message across?
Well, I think with respect to the person you just interviewed, Extinction Rebellion are not going to be able to bring London to a standstill. Even at the height of their protests in 2019, they brought 5 junctions to a standstill in the centre of London, rather than the entire London. London has an amazing, resilient transport infrastructure. I think blocking a couple of junctions is a reasonable position, considering the danger London and the wider world is in.
What do we need the government to do? I mean, they need to do something pretty quickly, don't they, Donnachadh? I mean, we know that. I can hear the emotion in your voice. I mean, I feel similarly to you. I mean, we're seeing it all over the world. The world is changing.
Yeah, thank you. And it's really good to hear a presenter hearing the emotion, because it is very emotional for the people and the families who've lost their loved ones. I mean, watching people being burnt alive. I mean, 10 billion sea creatures were boiled alive in the seas off Canada. 1 billion burnt to death in Australia. So you're right, it's really emotional. But going to your question, I think what they're calling for this week is really practical. If we have got if the banking system has $5 trillion available to invest over the next 10 years in fossil fuels, why not simply the central banks regulate that cannot be invested in fossil fuels, but must be invested in the alternative transition to a green economy, giving jobs for Britain people, bringing taxes for the government, and a win-win. That is a really practical thing that they're calling for this week, and I think all of us should get behind it. And what's quite exciting from my perspective, on a positive perspective, is internationally the European Investment Bank and the most respected energy think tank in the world, the International Energy Agency, also backs this call. This is a really practical first step to switch the billions from damaging us to billions saving us.
I've just an email from Ray in Sheffield who says, get the government to send all the protesters at no cost to China to protest there.
Well, we hear that I've been dealing with this point all week about China. The fact is, Britain is the centre of 15% of the world's fossil fuel investment. It's the centre of one of the world's 2 or 3 largest oil corporations. It's the centre of the world, over 50% of the world's fossil fuel insurance industry is based in London. So London is one of the largest centres of the fossil fuel economy. And so they were absolutely right to be protesting in central London. And what they're absolutely right is that the COP should also require China and the other high polluters, as well as Britain and America, to come to the table and agree an end to funding new fossil fuels and agree that internationally. I think that's a really good thing to be doing.
We've all got our part to play in this, haven't we, quite frankly. Donnachadh McCarthy, climate columnist for The Independent, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to talk to you. Thank you.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.